America's farmers and ranchers, they got a special shout out from the Oval Office this week. It was during a press conference announcing the trade deal with the United Kingdom. President Trump said the agreement will greatly benefit rural America.
The deal includes billions of dollars of increased market access for American exports, especially in agriculture, dramatically increasing access for American beef, ethanol, and virtually all of the products produced by our great farmers. And our Secretary, as you know, of Agriculture is here. Brooke, thank you very much for being here.
Day. Thank you, sir.
You'll let the farmers know.
Well, you heard there, Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins was also in attendance for that announcement. She did explain part of the deal includes a big win for beef producers, with around $250 million in exports for products like beef. Tariff rates, they were adjusted as well. The UK has dropped their rate, while the U.S. saw a jump to 10%. President Trump also said the UK would be removing non-tariff barriers as part of the agreement. Secretary Rollins will be in the UK early next week to talk with her British counterparts. Well, the new trade deal, it has many keeping a very close eye on the remaining negotiations with other countries and the potential impact for agriculture on a global scale. Host of Real Ag Radio, Sean Haney, joins us now for more on this. Sean, the Trump administration's trade team is going to be talking to China this weekend. What are the signals that you're going to be watching for here?
Hey, great to be with you here this morning. And President Trump said, Secretary Rollins, let the farmers know. Well, RFD TV's letting the farmers know in terms of what the significance of that UK trade deal. This weekend's bigger. I think a lot of agriculture across the U.S. is, glad to hear there's, maybe some new markets for U.S. products into the UK. But China is a much bigger deal, especially as it applies to, obviously, things like soybeans and corn and some of the other products produced in the Midwest. Signals to watch, are we escalating or are we de-escalating? There's been a number of different reports from numerous news outlets that China's really going to these meetings this weekend, trying to get a better understanding of what exactly is the Trump administration looking for here. I think that's a key. And if you look at some of the other countries that the U.S. has been negotiating with, that has been kind of the same request. Okay, we get it. You're unhappy. What are you looking for? And what do we need to do to get to the other side of that? That's I think from China's angle, that's what they're going to be. That's something to be watching for very closely.
A lot of people speculating, can the UK deal with the U.S. have an influence on what China's going to do, or maybe influence some kind of symbolism? I keep hearing that word over and over again. But a lot of folks saying China is not going to be influenced by anybody. Listen, we're major trading partners, right, with the U.S. So is there anything that you think China would take away from this? Do you think anything in good faith, how it would play out?
Yeah, well, I think the positive here is that there's a deal to be done. There's a deal out there somewhere. I think, for a lot of people following this trade file and the volume of deals that the Trump trade team's trying to put together here, some of these were promised like 2 weeks ago. And hey, finally, we see the UK one, that one get across the line. Now, that's a much easier monster to tackle, even though it's taken a long time. It's a much easier one than what's going to be negotiated with China, especially with the economic conditions in China. Can China really step up and, do like a phase one sort of deal that was done last time with different economic times for them? And they've got a little bit more economic clout and don't have as good of a relationship with President Trump as maybe the UK does.
Well, let's talk about what's going on right now with the U.S. and India and that trade pact trying to firm up. It seems like they're really trying to get everything in place. And as you mentioned, a lot of countries now, everybody coming to the table, everybody trying to figure out, yes, what does the U.S. want? Let's negotiate. How do you think that will progress with all these other countries, including India?
Yeah, when we look at India and the EU, what comes to mind right away for me is non-tariff trade barriers. And so there's a lot of focus on the tariff rates, and that's one thing. And a lot of times the tariff rates are low. Like Europe has come up and said, hey, we'll go to zero on tariffs. Well, that sounds great at 100,000 feet, but if you've done any sort of trade with Europe, you know that is a bit of a negotiating tactic to make you feel you have something, and then they do nothing but block you with non-tariff trade barriers. That's been Canada's experience. That's been Australia's experience. So U.S. needs to pay particular attention to the experiences of some of those other countries. And India is really no different than that. No, if you look at, for example, commodities like U.S. corn, sorghum, they're very excited about those commodities being a feedstock in poultry production in India, as well as probably the ethanol industry as well. It's the non-tariff trade barriers that's really where some of the hang-up is with countries like India and areas like the EU.
Great, as always. Sean, thank you so much for your perspective on this. Always appreciate you being here. Host of Real Ag Radio, that is Sean Haney. You want to catch Sean's show, Real Ag Radio. It airs 4:30 p.m. Eastern. That's weekdays on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. And again, we always enjoy Sean and his entire team joining us here on Market Day Report.